Welcome to As-Sahwa's podcast, encouraging revival of the mind and the heart, seeking the truth and standing for what is right in the age of overloaded misinformation.
It's nearly been 1 year, or in fact, a couple of days, it will be the anniversary of the occupation of Gaza, which is a strange thing to say because what we're saying, the whole of Palestine has been occupied anyway since 1947. So, in fact, an area that's already been occupied is been occupied again. We've seen so many deaths, which I don't even know if the figure is correct anymore in terms of it being less in number or not. The amount of people that have been arrested in other parts of Palestine, such as West Bank, the chaos in the world where you have European countries that are more or less fighting each other. The leadership are on a warring of words when it comes to supporting and not supporting. You have countries like Germany, which is just so bizarre, it just doesn't make sense, where they are now questioning people, if you are going to apply for citizenship in Germany and you have been online pro-Palestinian, online comments, etc., you are not going to get citizenship for Germany. What connection does that have to do with Israel? We've seen so many demonstrations, protests all around the world. Countries far as Japan, South Korea, even in India, there's been protests, pro-Palestinian protests. I'm not even going to mention so much of the Muslim Arab countries because that's ongoing and it's not about to stop. We are here in the UK, in Europe, and we are seeing a lot of people getting arrested, not necessarily to do with the Palestinian protest or demonstrations, etc. However, because of the fact that they've actually been online and speaking pro-Palestine, and they may be working in certain governmental departments, they are beginning to face the brunt of it, and a lot of them are losing their jobs. We've seen how professors around the world are speaking up against the atrocity in Gaza, including professors in Israel, occupied Palestine, Israel as well. So it's not just about the fact that it's in certain Muslim Arab countries. Anas, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. It's a pleasure to be back in the Cage office.
You're most welcome.
Anas, tell us, how busy has Cage been from last year, more or less, say the 8th of October, up until now?
So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So, as you rightly mentioned, the work of Cage has increased many folds since October 7th last year. As we've all witnessed, the huge wave of repression against any form of Palestinian or Palestine solidarity, be it from mundane protests to condemning Israel, to taking part in other sorts of direct action activities, to school children expressing their support for Palestine or condemning Israel. All of these things have put a huge amount of stress and demand on Cage, and that's something that we welcome. Cage is here as an establishment, an organization, to support the community, to enable the community to be able to stand up for what we believe in, for what is right, for what is just. So that's not saying this to complain, but it's saying this to show the sort of the scale of what's going on out there, and for us to just reflect over that and recognize that our communities over the last year, by and large, have mobilized to huge lengths, and that's something definitely to celebrate.
October the 7th, on Monday, the way I am looking at the situation, especially with the current situation with Iran, Hezbollah, and all the situation there. Now today there was a kind of, not an announcement, but there was talk that Netanyahu and Biden are thinking, calculating how to punish Iran, and they want to go for the oil refineries. Now, if you're going to go for the oil refineries, what do you think Iran is going to do? They're going to retaliate in the same sort of way. So it's going to bring chaos to Europe and Western world with the oil, etc. Now, we are living in a time where people are being forced to make those decisions on who they can and cannot support. Why is there such a big force of support for Palestine? And I'm not talking just about Muslims or Arabs, because it's to me, it doesn't seem like a just an Arab Muslim kind of support anymore. When we just came out the mosque, we saw a English white lady giving out leaflets saying, support the march tomorrow in central London. So the question here is, why do you think, in your opinion, that there's an outrage with the public, not so much the governments? We know a lot of governments have come out in support, such as South Africa, Spain, even Belgium the other day said that they are requesting sanctions to be put onto Israel after what they did in Lebanon. So in your opinion, why do you think there is such a force of people internationally supporting the oppressed people of Gaza and Palestine?
I think because Palestine is a human cause, is a cause that is so simple, yet the enemies seek to make it so complex in order to distract people and to dissuade them, discourage them from supporting it. But I think in the age and the era of the social media, where people have primary source access to what's actually happening on the ground, once you see the devastation, once you see the apartheid, once you see the occupation, once you see the genocide, the murder, the killing, the imprisonment, the torture, the rape, there were stories of prisoners being raped by Israeli soldiers that were, men who were kidnapped from Gaza. So once people see that, they recognize that, there's only one position that you can take, which is to oppose that wholeheartedly. I think most people, their moral compass points in the right direction. They will, when they see human suffering and they see oppression, they recognize it in a sort of innate way. In Islamically, we would refer to that the fitrah, meaning the natural disposition of people is to reject oppression, is to reject occupation and transgression of people's rights. So I think that's why it's so hard to discourage people from supporting Palestine, because it's so simple in that way, and it takes a huge amount of propaganda to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds in order to distract away from that fact. And we've seen that it's failed. It's failed miserably. Israel today is far more isolated, more condemned. The project of its or the premise of its entire existence hasn't been under question more than it is in this current moment. 1 year on from their genocide, because every day they are compiling the evidence list against why this apartheid settler colonial outpost needs to be dismantled. And it's important as well, whilst we're talking about this, especially in the context of October the 7th, is that we need to reset the narrative slightly. So the starting point is not October the 7th. The starting point is really about 100 years of colonization, of occupation. Palestine for the last century has been either under the British mandate, British direct occupation, or thereafter under the Zionist occupation. The Palestinian people have been resisting both throughout the duration of that time. And they have every right to resist their occupiers. And that is the context that we need to see these events in. It'll be disingenuous to start the debate on October the 7th and how the mainstream media like to frame it. And once you recognize these are an occupied people, these are an oppressed people who are fighting for the liberation of their land, you start to understand why things happen and why things and why we are where we are. And had it not been for the sort of Western support enabling Israel, enabling the genocide, Perhaps we are not seeing these huge numbers of deaths, as you alluded to in the introduction. In fact, just today, I was looking at a news report. I think some reports that were submitted by a U.S. agency that said at the very least they estimate the death toll in Gaza is somewhere around 118,000.
Wow.
The official estimates are around the 50,000 at this moment, and those are people who they can name, but there are countless people who they can't name and they can't find bodies for. People have been obliterated by missiles or buried under the rubble. Maybe their bodies have been taken away. We know the Israelis they literally take away dead bodies, and occasionally they would just drop off a truckload, a container load of unnamed bodies decaying in body bags, and just say like it's sort of like really morbid scenes, reminiscent of the most evil sort of actions that humanity have and depraved acts that humans can partake in. So I guess that sort of answers your question and provides a little bit of context to where we stand today.
Yeah, you mentioned quite a few things. See, what puzzles me is the mentality of these people in the right of what they can do, and they have no shame. And one of those issues you mentioned was the rape of Palestinian prisoners. How that soldier who admitted to the rape, Israeli citizens were trying to smash down the place where he was being held to free this rapist. There was debate about by Israelis that they should have the right to rape. Okay, even some so-called, I'm not going to say all Jews, but some so-called Jewish rabbis came out in support of allowing their soldiers to rape. Okay, but the problem here is that he's come out as a celebrity now in Israel and being praised, and yet there's been no condemnation from around the world. And this is bizarre. When Iran retaliated and fired those missiles to Israel, the very next day, every Western European supporter came out saying Israel has the right to defend itself. That term itself is just not there anymore. It's been absolutely used and abused. Nobody accepts it. Okay, so how is it possible that we live in this day and age where we are able to talk about Ukraine being supported, given weapons, given money to fight against Russia, but the very country that you're seeing that is opposing human rights, that is being, in fact, racist they are being, right? How many non-Muslims have gone to Palestine and Israel and said that my Palestinian driver said to me, "Sir, I can't drive down that road. You can walk there, but I can't go through there." My Palestinian driver said, "I can't drink water from over there, but you can, I can't." So when people speak about apartheid states, we are actually seeing this apartheid state, that you have a tier system of who is a citizen in Israel. So you have maybe the Israelis, you might have some Israeli Arabs, but they don't share the same status as the Israelis, okay? And then you have others, the other tier system that they have. So they cannot speak and say, we are the democracy of Middle East after doing all of this kind of behavior and these actions. But what is concerning, how can countries such as America, Britain, come out in force? In Germany, I just don't really understand how Germany has come out and justified at least 90% of what Israel is doing. Yes, they've said Netanyahu, if he does come towards Germany, because the ICJ has given their fatwa, I was going to say. But anyway, given the verdict that this person should be arrested, then we will do it. In one hand, you're saying we're going to do what the ICJ has ordered, and the other hand, you're saying we're still going to financially and physically support Israel in the bombing and killing of Palestinians. It's just the mentality I don't understand. How is it possible? Now, this may be controversial, but I am going to say this. I'm talking about comparison, okay? When you look at what Nazi Germany was doing to the Jews themselves, Hitler, obviously, yeah, what he was doing and his mentality behind what he was doing, it's very similar to what I can see happening in Palestine, occupied Palestine right now. Okay, I'm not saying Jews are Nazis. I'm not saying Israel or occupied Israel are Nazis. I'm just making it clear that the comparison here, the mentality here, is what we're talking about. How is it possible that in this day and age we are getting a people that are subjugating another people to the very things that have happened, and they themselves will always use the term Holocaust happened once, Holocaust happened once, we can't let it happen again, Iran is going to wipe out the Jews. That's absolutely not true. If Israel was such a safe place, a democracy, then how comes we find so many Jews are not living in Israel and not even supporting Israel itself? I want to come back to the UK to mention about the issues of some of the arrests that took place here. And we know the famous coconut case. Anas, if you could just give us a brief understanding of what happened with that case and what happened to the actual lady in that case.
So the coconut case, or the case of the sister Maria Hussein, on the 11th of November, which also is a Remembrance Day in the UK for the fallen in the war, there was a mass protest for Palestine on that day. Yeah, a huge one. Perhaps I think the biggest in London so far since the genocide began. She was there with her family carrying a placard. On one side of the placard, I think it had Suella Braverman as a sort of vampire, and on the other side it had, which is now the famous picture, a coconut tree with coconuts that have fallen down, and one or two of the coconuts were Rishi Sunak and Suella Braverman, the former Prime Minister of the UK and the former Home Secretary or the Home Office Minister of the United Kingdom. So that picture was taken by someone who stopped her and said, "Oh, great picture, great poster. Can I take a picture of you?" So they took a picture of her, and within minutes, I think, from that picture being taken, it was uploaded online through the blog called Harry's Place. Now, Harry's Place, for those who don't know, is a deeply Islamophobic, hard pro-Zionist, pro-Israel sort of political blog that routinely doxes sort of Muslim personalities, imams and students and whatnot, puts their details online and sort of attacks them and tries to smear them. She, within 6 minutes of Harry's Place publishing that tweet of her picture, the Metropolitan Police said, "Yeah, we're investigating this for a possible hate crime."
So that actually came up on the Metropolitan Police Twitter feed.
Yeah. Right? So and then some, I can't remember the exact time afterwards, the Metropolitan Police then actually posted that picture. So they copied it and they actually tweeted it out on their own platform, and they have a few million followers. And that tweet had something like 16 million views.
Wow.
And it was absurd for an offence that there's no one who was harmed. There wasn't a victim who directly made a complaint. It was just political pressure applied on the Metropolitan Police, and they were more than willing to succeed to that pressure and make this woman's life a living hell. And subsequently, in the next couple of days and few weeks, her house was visited by police officers. Her house was sort of monitored by the press, trying to take pictures of her. There was articles written, attacking her family and her father's profession and all sorts of stuff that that none of us would like anyone to go through.
Did she lose her job?
Well, yeah, she was essentially she kind of parted ways with her employer. She's a school teacher, but obviously that would have never happened had the police not investigated her for a potential hate crime, right? I think 6 months later they decided to charge her, and a couple of months later she had her trial. Obviously, it was a hugely anticipated trial, and dozens of people attended the trial to support her in the courtroom and outside as well. And subsequently, she was acquitted and found not guilty. fundamentally, in this case, is the question of, are we allowed to criticize politicians? Are we allowed to expose politicians who use their racial identities? They might claim that they're Muslim, or they may be from an ethnic background, maybe Black Caribbean or Black African or Indian from the subcontinent or whatever, who sort of use their racial identities as sort of cloaks, right, in order to push what are clearly, you can demonstrate that these are racist policies. These are policies that are anti-freedom policies that restrict people's freedom of protest, freedom of speech, and policies which target people because of their faith or because of the color of their skin, and calling them out for that. This is a well-known political critique. I mean, if you look at any book into racism, these terms like coconut or like other native informant and other similar phrases are widely used. And it's not a racial slur, it's a description of someone's politics.
So just hold the thought there.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to that. So just hold that thought there. Let's just put it into context. When we're saying coconut, what does coconut actually mean? So we're saying for somebody mainly from an ethnic background, especially if you're, say, from a South Asian background, you're going to say you're brown from the outside, but you're white English from the inside.
It's not necessarily white English, but it's brown on the outside, right?
Yeah.
And that you are pushing what are white supremacist, racist policies that harm your own people, right?
But there is another phrase though, okay? And it's the famous phrase from Malcolm X, and he spoke about the field Negro and the house Negro. Yeah. Okay. There was a professor also. Was he charged with saying the same sort of thing? Yeah,
there was a professor, Kehinde Andrews, who made similar comments. In fact, much stronger comments, really, about a commentator on GB News, right? Who's also black. Okay. And he used the term that you referred to, that Malcolm X used. And the police visited him in his house and invited him over to what they call a voluntary interview. Obviously, if you don't volunteer yourself for that interview, then it becomes, it'll be a compulsive or sort of you'll be compelled to attend an interview, right, or forced. And then within about a few weeks, they sort of said to him, no further action. So
so for him there was no further action.
Yeah.
But for the lady here, they took her to court, right? So they took her to court. How long was the case for? Do you know, in court?
Yeah, the case lasted 2 full days.
2 full days?
2 full days. So there was obviously, she was cross-examined by the prosecution, and there was a number of experts who spoke.
Experts on what?
No, experts actually on her side.
Okay, great.
So some academics and journalists who presented the case, why it's not a racist term. Okay. In fact, funnily enough, actually, the prosecution or the police, they sought to find any expert. They couldn't find anyone who's willing to go with them to court. And they actually called Professor Kehinde Andrews. They actually called him up and they wanted him to be part of their case. Yeah. And he told them essentially, are you having a laugh? Like, you've called the last person. And it clearly shows, it's a politicized prosecution. The aim of it is to create some sort of like chilling effect, right? So right now, before anyone uses any of these terms to refer to any particular person, they're going to think 2, 3, 4 times, right? Like, am I going to get a visit by the police? Am I going to end up losing my job? And that's the intended consequence of such prosecutions. It's to cause that that fear factor, and alhamdulillah, sister obviously she beat her case, but that doesn't mean they also weren't successful at the very least in causing people to question their actions if they ever decide to say these sort of terms.
That's correct. Yeah. Now, I was speaking to someone who works in a London council, and she was saying how Muslim/Arabs are on the edge in speaking about the issue of Palestine and Israel, etc. But the white English maybe not just English, but Scottish, wherever they are, but they're white, they speak up openly about it. And they will say, free Palestine at work, at their desk, and they wouldn't be concerned.
Yeah.
And they would wear the kafir, where the Muslim stroke Arabs will not wear it, okay? And it was the white lady who turned around and said to the other lady, I can do it because I've got white privilege.
Mm-hmm.
So you can kind of see how even the white population are realizing the level of racism within the system, and how certain people will be targeted, and therefore they can't say and do the things that they can, and they are taking an opportunity to do it, right? But now we come to a point where countries like Germany are saying, if you're applying for citizenship and you have been pro-Palestine on your social media, you ain't going to get no citizenship. We know there was something similar here in the UK as well, about the Star of David's going to be at every checkpoint, etc. What I just don't understand. Look, you've heard about France saying you're going to get fined if you speak up against Israel, but you can criticize France and nothing's going to happen. You can criticize Britain, nothing's going to really happen. You can criticize Germany all you want, but you walk around with the Palestinian flag like that little 10, 12-year-old kid running around from the police, okay, because he's holding a Palestinian flag. You think to yourself, what on earth is going on in Europe, especially today? So, Anas, where are we going to go with this? Where do you think, in your opinion? You see, the way I'm seeing it right now is I'm going to see this whole thing on October the 7th. The Western media is going to come out in support of Israel and speak about what happened on the October the 7th and how Hamas came and this organization came and killed 1,200 people, but yet there'll be no mention about officially over 40,000 dead. Okay, there's going to be no mention about, like we mentioned, the rape cases. There's going to be no mention about how the Israelis have stopped food and water and electricity from going into Gaza itself. No mention about the amount of arrests made in West Bank. Okay, and how the Palestinians in West Bank are being restricted as well. So the question now is, where is this going to go beyond? Where will it go? How much support is the Western government going to continue to give to a country, colonialist country, that is occupiers, that is practicing apartheid?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I mean, it's true. Across Europe, we're witnessing widespread repression of Palestine solidarity from countries like Austria, where historic laws to sort of prevent the re-emergence of the Nazi party are being reformed. That's the word they're using, to expand them to include any sort of support for Palestine.
Wow.
Yeah. You have multiple protests banned in France, in Austria. You have the banning of the phrase "from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free." So, for example,
that's actually banned in Austria and Germany.
In Austria, yeah, effectively banned.
Wow.
And it's very ironic because the Palestinians are the ones who are being exterminated, right? And they want their homeland free from the river to the sea. The people who are actually actively sort of genociding everyone who is from the river to the sea are the Israelis. Yeah, and it's as though it's a process of projection. So they're projecting their own mentality on the movement for the liberation of Palestine. The movement of the liberation of Palestine is not a movement to wish to eradicate everyone. I mean, Muslims, Jews, Christians have lived in that land for as far as history goes back, really. And there's never been a problem of hosting different nationalities, different faiths and ethnic groups within that region. The Palestinians themselves have a rich and very diverse history. So it's not about the extermination, but it's about liberating the land from occupation, and that's something they fail to understand, because for them, their modus operandi is to kill, is to exterminate, is to commit genocide. Going back to the question where this is going, I think perhaps maybe what we want to say is, where are we going to let it go to or reach to? I think the responsibility is on us to take a stand, to hold the politicians to account, to take action that reduces our sort of complicity in the systems that enable the genocide. You know, right now there's an election coming up in the US. There's a huge debate whether Muslims should vote for Kamala Harris or whether they should vote for Trump or refrain from voting altogether. Besides what they should do, I mean, definitely don't support Kamala Harris for her support for the genocide. But the point is what actions are we actively taking, right, to hold power to account, to restrict the supply of arms and munitions to Israel, to ensure that the public space is not a hospitable space for those who wish to support the genocide of our brothers and sisters in Gaza. You know, the airwaves still 12 months on are filled with voices that are entirely tone deaf, or at least lack any sort of human compassion or empathy, where they think, you know, like Madeleine Albright back in the 90s, when they told her the death of 500,000 Iraqi babies as a result of US sanctions, and she said it's a price worth paying. These people live, as one journalist today, he wrote, Owen Jones, he was saying that these journalists, these people, they operate in a completely different moral universe. For them, the Palestinians are the other, and the Israelis are them, are us, right? And therefore the Israelis must be protected at all costs. Any harm that comes across them or comes upon them needs to be repelled in the most sort of like brutal of ways, whilst the Palestinians can die or drown or suffocate or, you know, starve to death. It makes no difference. So I think, yeah, to go back to the core issue, it's us. The question is on us. Have we done enough, and will we have the sort of the stamina to continue supporting and advocating for the liberation of Palestine? I mean, for example, there are thousands of Palestinian, you know, for want of a better name, hostages that are held by Israel. Thousands of them, a huge number of them are held in what they call administrative detention, which is basically without charge or trial, you know, and left in sort of torturous conditions. And yet no one speaks about these hostages or these prisoners. The world expects the Palestinians to not to survive, but just to sort of exist in the periphery whilst being slowly starved. I mean, Gaza was under 17 years or nearly 20 years blockade. Yeah, that itself is a genocidal endeavor. That, you know, the Israelis, it was so, you know, the sadism to such a degree where they are managing the flow of goods into Gaza by checking how many calories does each man, woman and child require in Gaza, and then adapting the aid or the flow of food and goods into Gaza based on that. So this is like, we're at these levels. Yeah. So I guess it's on us to do what we can, support the Palestinians, to raise our voice, and to defend their right to resist occupation. I mean, in the beginning you spoke about Iran and Lebanon and whatever. Israel has mastered the sort of grievance victimhood narrative. So it uses the victimhood narrative, right, to justify its actions in the public space, right, whilst its actual military posture is an aggressive one, is an offensive one, right? They talk about, you know, the sort of skirmishes they had with Hezbollah over the last 12 months, whilst forgetting that they've occupied parts of Lebanon for God knows how many years. They talk about, you know, unprovoked Iranian attacks, whilst they've attacked their embassy in Damascus. They've killed their sort of top military people, and there's, you know, and assassinate some of their scientists and whatever. So it's not come on, like, you know, are you maybe, you know, you can you can trick some of the people some of the time, but you can't trick all the people all the time. You know, you can't sustain that life for that long. Funny, you know, when Netanyahu last week, he was speaking at the UN conference, and with such contempt of to the UN General Assembly. I mean, in order for him to have a crowd, he brought a whole audience with him, like from Israel, right, to applaud him whenever he pauses, right. He talks about wanting to have peace with its neighbors, yet saying that Israel lives in a violent neighborhood. So condemning neighboring states while saying they want to have peace with them. As the Quran speaks, they claim that they are peacemakers, but in fact they are the ones who are causing the corruption in the land. So for us, the central things have to always be that we have to stand for our Palestinian brothers and sisters. We have to make it extremely difficult in the public space for people to support the genocide, for people to support Israel. And I think most people are on side on that anyway. And we also have to center the issue of, Masjid al-Aqsa. It's constantly being desecrated. There's always, the far right in Israel who are actually in government. They're constantly pushing more and more for its destruction. For it to be taken away from the Muslims entirely. Obviously, there's now some sort of there's already attempts to sort of limit its usage anyway, and definitely the prisoners in Palestine, and the prisoners who elsewhere, political prisoners in the UK and elsewhere, who as a result of their advocacy for Palestine or aid work for Palestine have found themselves behind bars. And as a community, we need to stand for these people and demand their freedom.
Last year, I was going to Jeddah for Umrah, and I was with my family. I was stopped at the airport just before getting onto the plane. They took me off, and they said, "We need to question you." And I said to them, "Are you serious? You're going to make me miss my plane?" They said, "Well," I said, "You've known for 6 months I was going to take this journey because I booked it 6 months ago. Surely it come up on your manifest, and you know totally." They said, "We're only doing our job." Anyhow, when they sat me down, they started to ask me loads of questions, etc., held me under the Schedule 7, blah, blah. So they said, "Look, because it's been 1 week to October the 7th, and you're traveling abroad, we need to just make sure you're going on your journey." So I laughed at them. I said, "You could have had this conversation last week. You could have just called me. I would happily come down to any police station and have this discussion with you. No. What took it to you? What made you come to stop me when I'm just about to get on the plane?" Anyway, my family went ahead. I told them, "You go ahead." They let me go after 6 hours. And the only reason why they stopped me was because they just wanted to check my phone. They asked me a few questions about my phone, and then they asked me long questions about Palestine. So I thought, I know I don't have to answer these questions. I know I don't, because it's only about my travel, but I'm going to answer it. So I gave them a long history lesson, and I exhausted them, absolutely exhausted them, because at the end of it, they must have drank about 6 cups of black coffee to stay awake, right? What was the point? And when I came back, same thing. They stopped me for 20 minutes only, then off you go, okay? But what did you achieve? It is, as you said, it's about putting that fear factor into people. You're going to talk about Palestine. This is what's going to happen to you, okay? So my last question to you, Anas, is it worth people putting themselves at risk? For example, here in the UK, is it worth that person losing their job because they're being vocal about Palestine? Is it worth that person being tarnished in his or her community because they are speaking up against oppression? At the end of the day, is it worth going through all of that trouble?
I think the best answer to this really is just to reflect on the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. When you are advocating something which is the truth, something which is justice, which is just, when you're confronting oppression and occupation, you must do so wholeheartedly. You must do so wholeheartedly. You know, the Prophet ﷺ faced, Quraysh came to him and they offered him deals. They said to him, "Look, we'll worship your God 1 year, you worship our God 1 year." He refused. He said, "Look, we'll make you into like a king, but just don't stop pushing your message." And he refused. And in a narration it says, if you put the sun in my right hand and the moon in my left hand, I would not leave calling for this deen. And that's what we need to reflect on that sort of legacy of standing by what is true. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has guaranteed for us our rizq. We are not the custodians of our rizq. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the provider. You know, in the hadith, the Prophet ﷺ mentions that if we had true trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He would provide for us like He provides for the birds. Like they leave their nests and their sleeping places, right, hungry, empty bellies, right, and they return with full bellies. The bird doesn't have a 9 to 5. Yeah, it just goes, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala provides for it, right, from the rizq that's from whatever the provisions that the land provides. And I think we need to put that in mind. Also put things in perspective, right? So you're talking about risk. I mean, what risks are we talking about? Are we talking about people putting their lives on the line? We're not talking about that, right? Are we talking about that you are going to be arrested and raped by an Israeli soldier? That's not the risk we're talking about. So we're talking about risks that are, in the grand scheme of things, they pale into insignificance when you contrast them or compare them against what is actually happening on the ground in Palestine. So that's the perspective that I'd say that we need to adopt. You know, we should stop thinking about risk aversion and talking about risk and talking about danger and all that sort of stuff, and start talking about what is the ethical thing to do, what's the moral thing to do, what's my duty, what's my obligation, right? And when you start thinking in that way, you liberate yourself. Yeah, because right now, for example, Muslims complain about, and rightly so, that the media is hostile to them, is hostile to their faith, yeah, to their identity. Yet, some Muslim institutions would refuse to platform some Muslim speakers because they're controversial, right? So they've internalized the sort of Islamophobia. So essentially, they'll do like a Google search on the speaker, and they'll find, the Daily Mail's written something about him, the Times have said something, therefore it's too high risk, we can't afford to let this speaker in. So therefore, the gospel you're relying on, your Quran, right? Your wahi is the Daily Mail, right? And you're using that as your sort of criterion to judge whether someone should be allowed to speak to your audience or not. We can't get to, and that's because we've internalized the hate that we receive, and we've internalized that fear, and it's become part and parcel of our day-to-day sort of activities. I think one thing the genocide in Gaza has done is that it's liberated so many people across the globe from that paralyzing fear, and they've realized that fear, as the Quran says, إِنَّمَا ذَلِكُمُ الشَّيْطَانُ يُخَوِّفُ أَوْلِيَاءَهُ, that the shaitan, he's the one who tries to inspire fear in people from his allies, right? فَلَا تَخَافُوهُمْ وَخَافُونِي, don't fear them, but fear me, fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Don't fear the devil and the allies of the devil and those who commit evil and oppression on the land. So I know I've spoken in more sort of like Islamic terms, because I know the audience and the listeners are predominantly Muslim. But I think everyone can take something from that.
I was just going to say, let's not forget about the non-Muslim support. The non-Muslim have been very big in this. For whatever reason, a lot of people say, it's because of their ideology. They are socialist. They want to be a part of this. Whatever it may be. I know where I work, a lot of non-Muslims, I don't talk much about it. I kind of allow the conversation to happen from their side, and then I will come into it. But a lot of the conversation has been started by non-Muslims, and they are so disgusted at what is going on, and disgusted the lack of what this government is doing, and the previous government, of what they're doing in support of a country or an organization such as the Zionists, Israel. So even for them now, they are losing their jobs. They are being sidetracked. They are being pushed to the side. They are being, subjugated to some of those issues that the Muslims are as well. So we don't want to just say this is just a Muslim thing. But you're right, because we are thinking of a very Islamic kind of point of view and understanding, but the non-Muslims are doing it because, like you said, it's a very human story, and this is what they are seeing. That naturally, when a human sees another human suffering, it does affect them, until they are conditioned in such a way that that human suffering doesn't mean nothing to them anymore.
Yeah, dehumanize them.
100%.
Exactly, and that's what it is. I mean, that's what the media is attempting to do, right? To relegate the lives of the Palestinians to something lesser than insects, cockroaches, and an inconvenience at best, right? Something to sort of write when you're writing an article. Yeah, you know, Israel is defending itself, but yeah, somehow whilst it's doing that, it's committed the genocide. But that's besides the point. Let's continue talking about how it's a flourishing and sort of blossoming democracy, and, you know, a beacon of hope in the region.
And as we come to the end of the show, appreciate your time. What I would say is carry on doing what you're doing. I hope, inshallah, that Cage is around for many, many years and they continue with the good work. And for anybody else should be supporting Cage in the works they are doing. Jazakallah khair, barakallahu feek. Hope to see you next time.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair for hosting.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.